What would you do if your own father told you your children didn't deserve the same love, the same space, or even the same bedrooms as your brother's kids? What if you had to watch your children shrink smaller and smaller, humiliated in their own grandparents' house, while everyone else smiled as if it was normal? That's what happened to me, and I didn't just survive it, I made sure they all regretted underestimating me. If you've ever been overlooked, disrespected, or treated like you were invisible in your own family, then this story is for you. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe for more stories of betrayal and justice, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my shoes? My name is Claire Matthews. I'm 36 years old, a nurse, and, most importantly, a mother of two incredible kids, Ethan and Lily. Ethan is 11, thoughtful and shy, the kind of boy who sketches robots in the corners of his math homework. Lily is 8, bold and bright, always singing at the top of her lungs. They are my whole world. When my marriage ended, I thought the worst was behind me. My ex-husband walked out with barely a goodbye, leaving me with bills, a mortgage I couldn't carry alone, and 2 devastated kids who kept asking, "Why doesn't Daddy love us anymore?" It broke me. And in that brokenness, I did what so many single moms have to do. I swallowed my pride and went back home. Back to my parents' house in Columbus, Ohio. I told myself it would be temporary. Just a few months while I got back on my feet, saved some money, and figured out how to start fresh. My parents, especially my dad, assured me it was fine. "Of course, sweetheart," he said when I asked. "Family takes care of family." At the time, I believed him. The first few weeks weren't terrible. Ethan and Lily shared the upstairs guest room, their posters taped carefully on the walls, their stuffed animals lined up on the bed. My mom made pancakes some Saturdays, and my dad even joined us at the table. It felt almost safe, like I could breathe for the first time in months. But then my brother Daniel moved back in. Daniel had always been the golden child. Older than me by 3 years, handsome in a bland corporate way, always Dad's favorite. While I put myself through nursing school working night shifts, Daniel got his MBA paid for. While I begged for help with rent after Ethan was born, Daniel got a down payment for his first house handed to him. And when he married Sophie, the whole family celebrated like it was a royal wedding. So, when Daniel and Sophie announced they were temporarily moving into my parents' house while their own was being renovated, I knew what it meant. We weren't equals under that roof. We never had been. The change happened fast. One evening, I came home from a double shift at the hospital, my scrubs still smelling like antiseptic, only to find all of Ethan and Lily's belongings piled in the hallway. Their toys, their clothes, even the posters Lily had proudly taped up. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. My dad stood in the doorway, his expression calm, almost bored. "Daniel and Sophie need the upstairs room for the baby. Your kids will be fine in the basement." "The basement?" I repeated. "Yes," he said. "It's just temporary. Don't make a fuss." I'll never forget the look on Ethan's face when he carried his sketchbooks downstairs, or the way Lily clutched her stuffed bunny to her chest, whispering, "It's cold down here, Mommy." The basement smelled of damp concrete. The single window was so small it barely let in light. The walls were unfinished, insulation poking through in places. It wasn't a room, it was a storage space. But to my father, it was good enough for my kids. That was the beginning of the slow erosion. At meals, Daniel and Sophie always got the best seats, the biggest portions. When Lily tried to talk about the songs she learned in school, Gad interrupted to ask Daniel about his job. When Ethan shyly showed a drawing, my mom smiled politely but quickly shifted the conversation to Sophie's pregnancy. Little by little, my kids faded into the background. The worst came one Saturday morning. Ethan had spent all week building a Lego city in the basement, meticulously placing every brick, every tower. He was so proud, his eyes shining as he tugged me by the hand to show me. But when we got there, the city was gone. Boxes had been stacked where it stood. "Grandpa needed the space," Daniel explained casually from the stairs. "It's just toys, Ethan. Don't cry." I watched my son's face crumple, and something inside me cracked with it. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How my dad's tone hardened when he spoke to me, but softened for Daniel. How my mom avoided eye contact when I pushed back. How Sophie smirked every time my kids were overlooked. It wasn't just favoritism. It was dismissal. We were second-class citizens in that house. Nights became unbearable. After 12-hour hospital shifts, I'd collapse on the basement futon with Ethan and Lily curled beside me, listening to the muffled laughter upstairs. Daniel's family had space, comfort, warmth. My children had shadows and silence. And through it all, my dad repeated the same line whenever I dared to speak up. "Don't make trouble, Claire. It's just temporary." But temporary stretched into months, and every day I watched my children shrink. Ethan stopped drawing. Lily stopped singing. They spoke less, smiled less, their little shoulders hunching as if they could make themselves invisible. It killed me. And the worst part, I started to believe my father was right, that we didn't deserve more, that we should be grateful for scraps. But deep down, another voice grew louder, a voice I hadn't heard in years. It whispered, "They're wrong about you, about your kids, and someday they'll regret underestimating you." I didn't know then just how far I'd go, or how much power I'd eventually hold in my hands. But I knew one thing for certain. I would not let my children grow up believing they were unworthy. And one day, my father, my brother, all of them would see exactly how wrong they'd been. It's strange how quickly a wound can become a routine. At first I fought every slight, every insult, every unfair choice, but after a while I stopped arguing. I learned to swallow my pride and grit my teeth. Because in that house, every protest was met with the same response. "Don't make trouble, Claire. It's just temporary." But temporary had stretched past 6 months, then a year. And in that year, my children and I learned exactly what we meant to my family. The basement became our prison. The walls sweated when it rained. Mice scurried in the corners at night. The one small window let in just enough light to remind us we were underground. Ethan's asthma got worse in the damp air. Lily developed nightmares so bad she'd bolt upright screaming, clutching her stuffed bunny until it was damp with sweat. I'd hold her, whispering, promises I wasn't sure I could keep. "It's okay, baby, Mommy's got you. We won't be here forever." But forever was exactly how it felt. Meanwhile, Daniel and Sophie thrived upstairs. Their baby, Owen, was treated like a little prince. My dad cooed over him, carried him around like a trophy. Mom cooked elaborate meals just for them, meatloaf, roast chicken, pies cooling on the counter. For us, leftovers, if there were any. I can still see Ethan's face one night when he asked if you could have seconds of mashed potatoes, only for Sophie to say, "Oh, sorry, sweetie, that's for Owen. He needs it more." He nodded silently and pushed his plate away. The favoritism bled into everything. Birthdays were agony. When Owen turned 1, the house was decorated top to bottom. Balloons, banners, a custom cake with his face on it. Dozens of relatives came, showering him with gifts. When Lily turned 9, my parents forgot until I reminded them that morning. My mom scrambled to bake a lopsided cake from a boxed mix. There were no decorations, no presents. Just a candle stuck into the frosting while everyone sat distracted at the table. Lily smiled bravely, but when she blew out the candle, I saw her lips tremble. Later that night, she whispered to me, "I wished that next year someone will remember." Ethan withdrew further. He stopped showing his drawings to anyone. His sketchbooks piled up in the corner of the basement, half-finished robots staring out with sad, empty eyes. At school, his teachers called me in. "Ethan is bright," one said gently, "but he seems disconnected, like he's carrying a weight he doesn't know how to put down." I knew exactly what that weight was. I tried to be everything for them. I worked double shifts at the hospital, sometimes 16 hours straight, just to save a little extra. I'd come home with aching feet and a pounding head, only to find their clothes shoved aside to make space for Daniel's boxes. Once, I walked into the basement to find Sophie casually folding their laundry on my kids' futon. "These are in my way," she said, wrinkling her nose. "You really need to teach Ethan and Lily to keep their stuff more organized." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. The final straw came one night after a brutal shift. I'd been on my feet for 14 hours, dealing with an understaffed ER and a flood of flu patients. My scrubs were stiff with sweat, my hands cracked from sanitizer. I dragged myself home, praying for a moment of peace, only to find Ethan and Lily sitting on the basement steps, tears streaming down their faces. What happened? I dropped to my knees. Ethan's voice shook. Grandpa said we're not allowed to sit in the living room anymore. He said that's for Daniel's family. I froze. He what? Lily hiccuped through her sobs. He said we don't belong there. Something inside me snapped. I stormed upstairs, my exhaustion burning away into rage. My dad was in his recliner, the TV flickering across his face. What the hell did you say to my kids? I demanded. He looked up, irritated. Don't use that tone with me, Claire. You told them they don't belong here? He sighed, as if I were a stubborn child. They need to understand the situation. Daniel and Sophie are starting their family. They deserve the space. Yours are older. They can handle a little inconvenience. A little inconvenience? My voice shook. You shove them into a basement. You erase their birthdays. You make them feel invisible. They'll toughen up, he said dismissively. Better they learn now. I stood there, trembling, staring at the man who was supposed to protect me, who was supposed to love his grandchildren, and all I saw was a stranger. I didn't argue anymore, because I realized words were useless. What I needed wasn't another fight. What I needed was a plan. That night, after tucking Ethan and Lily into the futon, I sat awake in the dark, my heart pounding. For the first time, I let myself think beyond survival, beyond temporary. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I used for budgeting, and started writing. Steps, deadlines, savings goals. Get us out, permanently. The next morning, I opened a new bank account in secret. Every overtime shift, every holiday bonus, every scrap of extra money went straight into it. I started living off rice and beans, packing leftovers from the hospital cafeteria. I stopped buying myself anything. Every dollar was for Ethan and Lily's freedom. Months dragged by. Every humiliation sharpened my resolve. Every night in the basement strengthened my determination. I learned to smile in silence when Sophie bragged about Owen's new toys. I nodded calmly when Daniel lectured me about responsibility. I even kept my head down when Dad dismissed me with a wave of his hand. Because inside, I was building something stronger than their cruelty. I was building an escape. The kids started noticing. One night, Ethan whispered, "Mom, why are you always writing numbers in that notebook?" I pulled him close. Because one day, those numbers will be our way out. Lily perked up. Like a treasure map? I smiled through my tears. Exactly, baby. A treasure map. That notebook became our secret hope. Every time things got unbearable, I'd squeeze their hands and remind them, we're following the map. We're getting closer. And slowly, I watched their shoulders straighten, their eyes brighten. They started to believe again. The final humiliation came one evening that summer. I came home to find Ethan's sketchbooks gone. Where are they? I asked, panicked. My dad shrugged. I threw them out. The basement was cluttered. I stared at him, disbelief crashing over me. Those were his drawings, his work. They were just scribbles, he said. He needs to focus on real things, not wasting time. I walked back downstairs, finding Ethan sitting silently on the futon, his hands clenched. His eyes were dry, but I knew that hurt was carving itself into him. And in that moment, I knew. We weren't just escaping. We were taking back our dignity. I didn't know exactly how. Not yet. But I promised myself the day would come when my father, my brother, Sophie, all of them would finally understand the price of what they'd done. And when it did, I wouldn't whisper. I'd make sure the entire family saw it. Because revenge wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a plan. The day everything shifted was a Tuesday in late September. I'd just come off a 12-hour shift at the hospital, my scrubs sticky with sweat, my body screaming for rest. I wanted nothing more than to crawl onto the futon with Ethan and Lily and sleep for a week. Instead, I walked into chaos. Boxes were scattered across the basement. My kids' clothes were crammed into trash bags. The futon mattress was leaned against the wall like it didn't belong. And standing in the middle of it all was Sophie, her arms folded, her lips curled in that smug little smile. "Oh, Claire," she said lightly. as if I'd walked into her kitchen instead of my kid's bedroom. We needed the space. Daniel's bringing down some equipment for his home office. Your kids can sleep on air mattresses for now. I stared at her, stunned. You moved my children's things? Without even asking. She tilted her head. Well, technically it's Dad's house, and Daniel needs the room more than they do. They're just kids. Just kids. As if that excused everything. Behind me, Ethan and Lily hovered, their eyes wide, their small bodies tense. Ethan's knuckles were white around his sketch pencil. Lily clutched her bunny so tight it looked like its seams might burst. Something inside me snapped clean in half. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the boxes like I wanted to. I just said one word. Enough. That night, after I tucked the kids into makeshift beds on the cold basement floor, I sat alone in the dark. My hands shook, my chest burned, but my mind had never been clearer. We weren't staying another day longer than necessary. No more waiting, no more excuses, no more promises of temporary. We were leaving. The next morning, I called a real estate office on my way to work. I'm looking for a 3-bedroom rental, I told the agent. Somewhere safe, close to schools. Budget is tight, but I can make it work. The agent sighed, like I was one of 100 desperate single moms she'd spoken to that week. I'll see what I can do. Days later, she called me back. I found something. Small, older place. Needs work, but it's available now. I met her that afternoon. The house was nothing fancy. Peeling paint, creaky floors, a kitchen that smelled faintly of mildew, but it had 3 bedrooms, a backyard, sunlight that poured through real windows instead of basement cracks. I stood in the empty living room and felt my chest swell. This is it, I whispered. The lease paperwork nearly drained my secret savings. I wrote the check with trembling hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But when the pen lifted from the page, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I owned my future. The next step was trickier, moving without them knowing. If I told my father or Daniel, they'd find a way to sabotage me, whether by convincing me it wasn't a good idea, or simply refusing to let me take what was mine. So I kept it quiet. Every night after my shifts, I packed little by little boxes of clothes, toys, blankets. I hid them in my car, driving them to the new house under the cover of darkness. It became our secret ritual. Ethan would fold his drawings carefully into folders. Lily would pack her dolls, and I'd whisper, "Shh, don't tell anyone. We're almost free." For the first time in months, I saw sparks in their eyes again. Ethan started sketching houses, labeling them with words like ours and home. Lily sang softly as she packed, her voice shaky but hopeful. They believed me, and I refused to let them down. Still, I knew we couldn't just disappear. That would leave them gossiping, twisting the story until we were villains. No, I wanted them to see us walk out. I wanted them to feel the sting of what they'd done. I wanted witnesses. That's when the idea came. Every year, my parents hosted a family dinner in October. A big event with aunts, uncles, cousins, 40 people crammed into that house, eating, drinking, swapping stories. That would be the night. In front of everyone. No secrets. No denials. No rewriting history. I would tell the truth. I would expose the way my children had been treated. And then I would walk out with my head high, leaving them with nothing but their shame. The thought electrified me. But planning it wasn't easy. I had to time it perfectly, so the new house was ready, so the kids had everything they needed, so my finances were locked down. I started a checklist. Lease signed. Utilities set up. Bedrooms furnished with secondhand beds and dressers. Fridge stocked. Every item I crossed off made me stronger. In the meantime, I needed allies. That came unexpectedly, through my Aunt Margaret, my mom's older sister. She stopped by one evening to drop off cookies, and instead found me folding laundry in the basement. She glanced around, her face tightening. "Are you and the kids living down here?" I nodded, shame prickling my skin. She pursed her lips, muttering, "Unbelievable. Your father always did favor Daniel, but this?" Her eyes softened. "Do you have a plan?" I hesitated, then told her everything. The secret savings, The house, the October dinner. By the time I finished, Aunt Margaret's eyes were blazing. Good! About damn time. She became my quiet ally. She slipped me cash for groceries that went straight into the moving fund. She dropped off curtains and rugs for the new house, telling me every home needs warmth, even a rented one. Her support was like water in a desert. For the first time, I didn't feel entirely alone. The weeks leading up to the dinner were some of the hardest of my life. I worked double shifts, packed in secret, soothed my children's fears, and carried the weight of a plan that had no room for error. At night, I lay awake, rehearsing my speech. The words I'd say, the calm smile I'd wear, the silence I'd let stretch until it crushed them. You told my children they didn't belong, I whispered into the dark. Now we're leaving, and you'll never have the chance to hurt them again. Every humiliation replayed in my mind. Every time Ethan was dismissed. Every time Lily was forgotten. Every time I was told not to make trouble. And each memory became fuel. By the time the October dinner arrived, I wasn't the same woman who'd crept into that basement months ago. I was stronger, sharper, ready. The house filled quickly that night. Laughter echoed through the halls, wine glasses clinked, children ran underfoot. Daniel and Sophie preened at the center of it all. Owen balanced on Sophie's hip like a crown jewel. I stayed quiet, helping my mom carry trays, biting my tongue when Dad barked orders. But inside, I was a storm, waiting to break. We sat down to eat, 40 people squeezed around tables, plates piled high, candles flickering. My father at the head, smug and satisfied, his perfect family gathered around him. And then, as the last bite of dessert was swallowed, I stood. The room hushed. I have something to say, I announced, my voice steady. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. And in that moment, I knew this was it. Everything we had endured, every tear, every sacrifice, every secret plan, it all led here. I looked at Ethan and Lily, their faces pale but hopeful, and I knew I wouldn't let them down. The clinking of silverware echoed like thunder in my ears. 40 relatives crammed into that dining room, laughter bouncing off the walls, wine glasses raised in cheerful toasts. To anyone else, it looked like the picture of family unity. But to me, it was a stage. And tonight, I had the script. We had 2 men in the group cut from the same coffee in mid-2000. I glanced at Ethan and Lily, sitting quietly at the far end of the table. Their plates held scraps compared to Daniel's overflowing portions. My heart clenched, but my hands were steady. Tonight, they wouldn't leave this table invisible. When the last slice of pie was eaten and the chatter began to lull, I stood. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor cut through the noise. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. I have something to say, I announced. My voice was calm, but it carried. Daniel smirked, leaning back in his chair. What now, Claire? Another speech about how hard your life is? Sophie giggled, whispering something to the cousin beside her. My father scowled, already irritated. But I didn't look at them. I looked at Ethan and Lily. This is the last dinner we'll ever spend here. I said, my words deliberate. Gasps rippled down the table. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling. I lifted the binder I'd hidden under my chair, the one full of rental papers, bank statements, proof of every sacrifice. I dropped it onto the table with a heavy thud. This, I said, is our way out. We're leaving this house. Tonight. Daniel scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Where are you going to go? Back to some dingy apartment? You'll be crawling back here in a month. I smiled, slow and sharp. Actually, Daniel, we're moving into our own home. 3 bedrooms, a backyard, sunlight. My children will have rooms of their own again. The color drained from his face. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough of this drama, Claire. Sit down before you embarrass yourself. I turned to him, my voice low but steady. No, Dad, you embarrassed yourself when you told my children they didn't belong here, when you shoved them into a basement while Daniel's babied at the upstairs, when you threw away Ethan's drawings, when you forgot Lily's birthday. That shame belongs to you, not me. The room fell into a stunned silence. Ethan's eyes widened, his little shoulders squaring for the first time in months. Lily clutched her bunny, her face glowing with something I hadn't seen in a long time, pride. I continued, my voice rising. You all treated us like we were invisible. But let me make something clear. My children are not invisible. They are not less, and I will never let them be made to feel that way again. Aunt Margaret, bless her, nodded firmly from the other end of the table. She's right. I've seen how those kids were treated in this house. It's shameful. The whispers started then. Cousins and uncles murmuring to one another, glancing at my father, at Daniel, at Sophie. The golden image of perfection cracked right there under the chandelier. Daniel's face turned red. You're ungrateful, Claire, after everything Dad's done for you. Everything he's done? I cut him off. Yeah, you mean forcing my kids into a basement? Belittling me at every turn? Favoring you so completely that you thought you were untouchable? No, Daniel, I don't owe Dad gratitude for cruelty. And I don't owe you anything. My father's voice roared over the table. If you walk out that door, Claire, don't bother coming back. You'll be cut off. I laughed then, a bitter sound that shocked even me. Cut off? Dad, you never gave me anything to begin with. You gave it all to Daniel, and you gave me contempt. I leaned closer, my voice dropping into a cold whisper that carried across the stunned room. I don't need your house. I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. I have everything I need right here. I pointed to Ethan and Lily. My family. The room exploded into chaos. Daniel shouting, Sophie crying, my mother begging for calm. But I tuned it all out. I walked to Ethan and Lily, took their hands and lifted them from their seats. Come on, kids, I said softly. Let's go home. We walked out of that dining room in silence, all eyes on us. The murmurs of relatives followed us down the hall, a chorus of disbelief and shock. I didn't look back. The front door closed behind us with a satisfying click. And for the first time in years, I felt free. We piled into my car, boxes already packed in the trunk from days of preparation. Ethan held his sketchbooks tightly to his chest. Lily hummed quietly, stroking her bunny's one ears. As I started the engine, Ethan whispered, Mom, are we really going to our own house? I squeezed his hand. Yes, baby, our house. No basements, no forgotten birthdays, just us. The drive was quiet, the night air crisp, the stars bright above. And when we pulled up to the little rental house, the one with peeling paint and creaky floors, Ethan and Lily gasped. It's ours? Lily asked, her eyes wide. Ours? I confirmed. We carried in the boxes together, laughter spilling into the empty rooms. Ethan ran to the bedroom I'd set up for him, marveling at the desk by the window. Lily twirled in her own room, hugging the curtains Aunt Margaret had given us. It wasn't perfect, but it was home, and it was ours. That night, after tucking them into real beds for the first time in over a year, I sat alone in the living room. The silence was strange, but it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. I closed my eyes and let the weight of years lift from my shoulders. We were free. And my father, my brother, Sophie, they could choke on the silence we left behind, because they'd lost the very thing they never valued, us. They say the loudest part of revenge is the moment of reveal, when jaws drop, eyes widen, and plates stop midair. But the truth is, the loudest part often comes after, in the tiny crushing echoes that follow, the calls that don't get returned, the empty chair at the holiday table, the slow, sticky creep of gossip. After that night, our lives changed fast. Word spread through the family like spilled wine. By morning, cousins who'd laughed with Daniel were whispering in corners. Aunties called my mother to ask what had happened, their voices low and shocked. People wanted explanations, drama, a version of the story they could tuck into their regular Sunday conversations. My father called twice the next day. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, something brittle and formal. Claire, you've embarrassed the family. Think about your choices. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Daniel exploded publicly first. He posted a long message, angry and performative, about betrayal, family, and the sanctity of respect. He painted himself the wounded heir, a man robbed of his destiny by a, quote, vengeful, unstable, unquote, sister. Friends rallied in his comments, throwing fuel on the fire. For a few days, it looked like the public would take his side. But the narrative shifted. as narratives do when the truth has weight behind it. People began to ask questions. Why had Claire's kids been shoved into a basement? Why were their birthdays neglected? Why had a grown man decided who deserved the living room? Caroline, bless her naive performative displays, tried to play peacemaker on social media. Heart emojis, posts about family unity, but sponsors who watched the unfolding drama quietly pulled back. Brands don't like controversy, and Caroline's brand was built on polished perfection. Within weeks, the endorsement calls slowed, then stopped. She started posting less. The constant stream of curated happiness hiccuped and eventually stuttered. Daniel's marriage began to show cracks too. Sophie, who had been all smiles and perfectly timed Instagram albums, found that the attention she relied on didn't fill the new silence. The petty digs she'd made at my kids ricocheted in private moments. Daniel, who'd always been sure of his seat at my father's table, found the chair wobbling. Investors and in-laws don't like to align with volatility. Suddenly, Daniel's promised future wasn't so certain. My parents. My mother shifted between guilt and anger, sending me long emails that were part apology, part self-defense. I didn't know how to fight him, she wrote. I tried, but he'd cut me off. There was an ache in the way she phrased it, and part of me wanted to soften, but another part, scarred and steady, remembered birthdays forgotten, and nights spent shivering in a basement. My father retreated. For a while he was unreachable. Then, like a man learning to lose, he tried the occasional quiet message, a check-in, a clipped suggestion about legalities, an awkward attempt to meet. I declined, not out of malice, but because the wounds were too fresh and the apologies too thin. Strangely, the family that stayed closest to me wasn't the one that shared DNA. It was Aunt Margaret, Lena from work, my neighbor Mrs. Alvarez who left casseroles on my porch, and even a few of Daniel's old schoolmates who privately sent messages asking what had happened. They called, visited, brought small housewarming gifts, fake plants, and a ham knit blanket, and sat with me on nights I felt the old loneliness creep back. Those people mattered. They became my real family. Meanwhile, life at the new house slowly became richness of a different kind. The kids' laughter returned in fits and starts. Athing set up a little corner for his drawings and began showing them to me again, with that shy pride that made my throat tighten. Riley sang at the top of her lungs in the yard, barefoot and dizzy with sunlight, and I cried into dishwater when no one looked because the sound was so achingly ordinary and perfect. I worked. I took on overtime. I budgeted like a drill sergeant. Curtains went up, thrift store furniture found its place, and we learned to make home out of second-hand treasures and each other. The peace was quieter than I expected, like a soft hand smoothing a wrinkled dress. And me? I learned that revenge had a second. Looking back now, I realized the revenge wasn't in the dinner speech or the slammed door. It wasn't even in the stunned silence on my father's face when I told the truth. The real revenge was in the life we built afterward. For so long, I'd been the daughter who lowered her head, the sister who kept quiet, the mother who accepted scraps just to keep a roof overhead. My kids were collateral damage in a house that should have been a refuge. I let that sink into my bonds for too long. But the night we left, that was the night I stopped accepting invisibility. The revenge wasn't fire and fury. It was dignity. It was proving that I could stand on my own 2 feet, not because they finally allowed it, but because I took it. It was showing my children that they were never wrong to want more, that the problem was never them, it was the people who couldn't see their worth. Do I sometimes ache when I think of what could have been? A softer father, a mother who stood up for me, a brother who wasn't blinded by entitlement? Yes, I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But that ache doesn't own me anymore. It reminds me of what I survived and how far we've come. Ethan and Lily don't remember the basement as much as I do. They talk now about their school friends, their hobbies, their futures. Ethan says he wants to design video games. Lee wants to be an actress. And every time I hear their laughter drift down the hall of our little house, I know we won. The Matthews family name, they still belong to my father's empire, but the legacy? That belongs to me, Ethan, and Lily. And it's a legacy of freedom, not chains, of courage, not silence, of love, not favoritism. So, if you've ever been shoved into a corner, told you weren't enough, treated as if your place in your own family was conditional, remember this. You don't need their table if they won't give you a seat. You can build your own and fill it with people who see you. That is revenge. That is peace. So, what do you think? Was I right to walk out that night and never look back? Or do you think I should have stayed and fought it out under my father's roof? I know one thing for sure. Walking away was the best decision I ever made. My kids deserved more, and I deserved to show them what it looks like to choose yourself over people who keep you small. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been overlooked, cut out, or made to feel invisible by your own family? Did you ever get your moment of revenge or your moment of freedom? Share it in the comments because you never know who needs to hear that they're not alone. And if my story struck a chord, if you've ever dreamed of proving everyone wrong, don't forget to hit like, subscribe for more stories of betrayal and justice, and join this community where we turn pain into power. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't making them pay, it's moving on and thriving louder than they ever imagined you could.